Visual Basic for Applications, VBA, and the Visual Basic Editor, VBE. What is Visual Basic for Applications, and when would I use it? Visual Basic for Applications is a computer language that is used within Excel. While Excel is a broader software used for many different types of analytical functions, VBA enhances its capabilities. Visual Basic for Applications is a human-readable and editable programming code used within Excel that gets generated when you record a macro. VBA is used to further expand what Excel is able to accomplish. VBA is often used to create macros, automate processes, generate custom forms, or perform repetitive tasks that may need minimal human intervention. Best of all, you do not need to be a programmer to use it. What is the Visual Basic Editor, and when would I use it? Visual Basic Editor is a code editor for VBA. If you have a macro completed, you can use this to edit the macro. You need to have the Developer tab on the menu bar to access it. You can also use the PC keyboard shortcut, Alt F11. It also stores all the macros that you recorded with the macro recorder. It has multiple tools helping you to write and manage the programming code. So our boss asks us to make updates to the format macro. The first, middle, and last name should all be uppercase. The first name should not be bolded. The first name should not be italicized. The middle name should be font size 12. The middle name should be in cyan font. The last name should have 2 underlines. And the active cell address should end up in A10. The format macro is open. And in here, the Developer tab is selected. And I clicked on Visual Basic. When I clicked on Visual Basic or press the Alt F11 key, it opens up the Visual Basic Editor. On the left-hand side, there is Modules, and then under that is Module 1. I double-clicked on Module 1, and it brought up the Visual Basic Editor, which allows me to make changes to the Visual Basic code. Now, this code was generated when the macro was being recorded. So the actual code starts out with sub, and then it has the name of the macro, followed by an open and close parenthesis. So the sub is required, and the open and close parentheses is required, and the name of the macro came from the actual name that we gave it when we recorded it. Underneath that are a number of comments, and a comment has a green apostrophe, and anything after that will be ignored when the actual code is executed. So it tells me the name of the macro, it put the description in here, and it also explained the keyboard shortcut that we used to record and run the macro. Then in the macro, we selected cell J10, and we put in Bernard, and then we selected K10 and we put in Manus, and then in L10 we put in Baruch. So the first thing that we need to do is make these capital. So we have J10, K10, and L10, and it is the code that was generated right here. So in order to make the change, we can simply go in here and type in Bernard in uppercase. But before I do that, I'm going to take that same line, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it and make that original line a comment. This way, I always have the original as a reference if I need to go back or show somebody what it was before. So here, we're simply going to make this a capital Bernard, and then I'm going to go to K10, which has the middle name, and I'm going to highlight that, and we're going to copy it and also paste it and leave the original intact. And this is going to be also in uppercase. The next thing is L10, which is the last name. So again, we're going to copy that selection of that line, paste it, and make that original as a comment, and make this in uppercase. So we have the changes made here, and the next thing that we were asked to do was take the middle name, and or I should say the first name, and let's continue with unbolding it and unitalicizing it. So J10 is the cell that has the first name, and the code that was generated said select J10 and make the bold for that cell true, and italicized it. And this is what happened when I actually clicked the icon for bold and clicked the icon for italics. So here, I simply want to do the opposite of what is showing. And since it says true, I simply want to make this false. So it's basically a switch on or off. And I want to do the same thing with italics. Turn it off. Now, I didn't copy these lines down, as I know if it's false, the only other change that it would have been would have said true. The next change that we need to do is change the font size for the middle name to a different number. In this case, the boss asked us for 12. So we see K10 was selected when we recorded our macro. And as you look through, there are again a number of things that can be changed within the code. And I see that we have a font size of 22. So I'm going to simply copy that. Of course, I want to have that original again in case I need to know what it was. And I'm simply going to change the font size here to 12. And again, some more things that were generated and can be changed. And I also need to change the color of that cell to cyan. So as I look through, I'm seeing that there is a color here, and it has some sort of a number assigned to it. Now, this doesn't make much sense to us, but this is the actual color that comes up for red. So there are a number of colors that we do not need to type in the equivalent for that number. So one of the things that we can do for certain colors is simply go to where it has the color, and we can type in the color rather than the number. So we'll take a look at that, but first we're going to copy this so we have this intact, and we'll paste it, and we'll make the original a comment. And here, we're simply going to go to where it has dot color equal, and here we'll simply type in VB cyan. So there are a number of colors that we can simply type in VB and the name of the color. And those include black, red, green, yellow, blue, magenta, white, and of course cyan. So those are some of those that you don't need the equivalent code, and it's a lot easier to pick one of those to show the color in the VBA. All right, so nothing with the tint shade. The column K is going to be widened. And then I was asked in L10 to put in a double underline. So I see that I had clicked in L10. I selected that cell and I actually put in a single underline. And here is where it looks like I need to make the change. So I'll copy that and I'll paste it. And I'll make this a comment. And I'll go from single, I'll make this a double. And of course, if I needed, it would have been triple, but in this case, I needed 2 lines. And then I continue along. There's a bunch of changes with patterns, and there is even another color for that particular cell. But the last thing that I needed to change was the ending position for where I'm going to be when I finish running this macro, and that is in cell A10. So this is telling me to end in A1. So I'm simply going to, again, copy, and I'll paste, and I'll put a comment, and this will be in A2. 10 as the last cell, and I always have at the very end of my macro an end sub. So we have a sub that starts out, and we have an end sub at the very end, and we have all of the recording that went on inside. And now we made some editing changes to the code in the Visual Basic Editor. No different than when you have a Word document open, you sometimes just go in and edit the Word document. So we're actually editing the VBA code in the Visual Basic Editor. So now that everything has been completed, we need to test and run this to see the output. One of the ways you can run it from the toolbar is go to the green triangle that's going to the right. And if you click on that Run button, it'll run the code, and you'll notice it made the changes that we had requested inside our editor. So if we wanted to make any other changes, we can simply, again, go back. And if we wanted to change, for instance, from cyan, and we wanted to do yellow, we could simply run it again, and you can see the change. If we wanted to make another change because maybe that color clashes too much, you can simply choose another color and run it. And there it goes. So making minor changes, you could always see how the actual updates would happen when you run it. Now, if you happen to try and type something in and by accident you make a mistake and you try to run it, it will not run successfully. So it did not change this to magenta because I had a spelling mistake here in this particular line. So one of the mistakes that I found in here was that I had an extra A. So if I go back to that line and I correct it and I run it again, it'll give me the correct actual color. Okay, so if you find that you are doing this and as you go along, you find that you have something typed in that may not be correct, something that is part of the Visual Basic that is important to have spelled correctly, and you go ahead and you run it, it will give you an error. And if you click debug, it will take you to the line that has the error. And you can simply look to see if you can locate what the error would be. In this case, it's pretty obvious. I had extra T's. So I then go ahead and I will reset and I will run it again and it runs properly. Okay, so there are a number of changes that were made. And again, anytime you have a line that you are changing, it's always best practice to make a copy of it with a comment for keeping the original intact in case you need to go back to reference it. Thank you.